Budget and Finance meeting to order. And this is really just a work session. The process isn't broken, so why fix it or why change it? So where we are in the process is during the retreat, Dr. Battle presented priorities, and then we decided what the three priorities were, and we as a board chose employee compensation, continuity of federally funded initiatives, academic and SEL integration, operations improvement, and school support. And so we had, at the last director's report, she gave a budget presentation regarding where we are in our funding, how it aligns with the core tenets, how we split our funds. It's kind of a basic education that we've gone through every year, and laying down the foundation of the aspirational budget. And so at this point, what I want to do is just have this kind of open discussion of the budget, see if there's any questions so we can begin to address, because at the next meeting we will have, we will vote on the aspirational budget to present to the mayor in the meantime, so we can have a conversation of where we are as a board, where we're going, and just use this time for that. I also want to put on the record for the committee that there will be community meetings coming up regarding the budget. We can have the budget input, and I'll refer this again, but on March 30th. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Sean?
Sean has them,
Yes.
if you don't mind him
Yes,
sharing them on your behalf.
Thank you.
We've got three, March 30th at 4 p.m., and then April 5th at 6 p.m., and April 7th at 5 p.m., so a few different time options.
All right, thank you. So that'll be also before the community have input.
You say those one more time and give us where they are going to
They're
be held.
virtual meetings, and they will be on Wednesday, March 30th at 4 p.m., Tuesday, April 5th at 6 p.m., and Thursday, April 7th at 5 p.m., and we'll likely send out notifications probably tomorrow.
Okay. And so we continue that. We did that last year. We also had an opportunity, Dr. Battle made the same presentation to the community and had people have input in that, into next questions of the director of schools and her staff. And so basically what I do is now just open for discussion about the budget, see if there's any concerns that we have, so we can begin to have a discussion in a more thoughtful way about it.
I have a question. To our support staff, is Mr. Little on the line? Okay, my questions are for him, so I'll wait. That's okay. That was it.
Okay. So thoughts, comments, concerns? Ms. Elroy?
Do we have any updates on where we are with the salary study in regards to our support staff and how that will affect our presentation to the mayor?
Not any additional updates from our last conversation. Again, as a reminder, the mayor commissioned the pay study, and similar to the teacher pay study one, it did take a little bit of time, but I would imagine his goal and plan is to have an update before his budget proposal, which coincides and correlates well with our budget building process, which is much different than years past, where we're not actually building the budget ahead of knowing exactly what that investment is going to be. As soon as we receive updates, we'll definitely share that information with the board, but I know there is a sense of urgency to get as much information out as possible, given where we are with our focus with our support pay.
Oh, okay.
So I brought this up last time, and I know, so in addition to the pay study about support staff, I brought up concern over raises for our school-based administrators. And I just want to kind of clarify the conversation that we had around that in the last budget meeting. Am I correct that there is going to be a pay study in the works for that level as well? Because we, when we tiered it, it was sort of last year we're focusing on teachers, this year support staff, and then it's next year that we're set to focus on like principals, assistant principals, is that?
Educated staff. Yes, that's been the plan all along. So
Okay.
if we think back to, oh gosh, I think it's been 3 or 4 years ago, now when we first rolled out our kind of framework and approach to the pay studies, it originally was in a different order, but where we've finally settled on with all the input was to focus on certificated, then support staff, and then certificated pay. So in that order, with kind of an ongoing commitment to continue to review our salary schedules and pay to keep up with inflation, cost of living, so on and so forth.
So will there be a third pay study around that?
There will be a third review around certificated administrators.
Okay.
But let me note that certificated administrators means certificated administrators. It doesn't, that goes beyond just our school-based employees.
Okay. Okay.
I'm clicking through all the slides.
Yeah.
We had a very detailed presentation. I would encourage the public to look at it from our last meeting. I apologize. In our community meetings, are we going to be discussing, in essence, the presentation that we all received in our last meeting, where it has all of the wishful budget options for them to provide input on?
Yes, the aspirational budget will continue to be the focus.
I knew it was not at wishful, and I appreciate I needed your correction, and I appreciate it. Okay. So all of those will be provided to them. And then are we going to be reaching out on, what is our communication plan on how to do that? Is that going to be through schools? Is that done through our community partners? Is that through the Parent Action Council? Are we just going to try to reach out like we usually do with community meetings?
Yeah, so historically, what we've done with those community meetings is that we will set the dates like we have. We invite all of our stakeholders to be a part of those conversations, to offer feedback, suggestions. I will say with great success, because of how we've built the aspirational budget, it has tended to really represent the needs and the desires of our stakeholders. But they are all kind of open to all of our stakeholders, and that's why we're varying dates and times so that everyone has genuine access to hear the presentation, take a look at the aspirational budget, and to provide feedback as needed.
Yeah. So a couple of other things I want to be sure that we're addressing. One is the pay rate for subs, and I think right now there's a weekly bonus. If you sub for an entire week, you get some sort of bonus. So I want us to consider really anything we can do to help add bonuses and incentivize sub pay.
Yes, so we do have a bonus for substitute teachers. If you also think back to some of our previous conversations and updates we provided, we launched last fall what we call a Project Response, which was directly tied to our substitute teachers, which now offers them, and this is now very research-based, full-time employment with benefits and other kind of perks around serving at one school consistently as a substitute teacher. So we've not just waited for this budget cycle, we've kind of repurposed and in a lot of ways rethinking what our vision is for substitute teachers. So the bonuses are there. We've also created a full-time substitute position consistently in schools with additional benefits to support our substitute teachers as well.
Okay. And then around our capital improvements, I've been thinking a lot about how capital improvements fit in with our overall sort of reimagined plan, especially when it comes to the, moving fifth grades back to elementary and the the amount of time that process is taking, how that relates to just the fact that the buildings don't have the capacity. So I just want to be sure that we're also thinking about that and in how those different pieces fit together in achieving that goal, because what I'm hearing, just what I'm hearing from a lot of folks, at least in my district, is let's get this done as quickly as possible.
So I think also we have to be mindful of capital improvements, that it's a separate budget, and a lot of that's dictated by Metro government, and also that part of that, it has to go with the package the mayor offices choose to also basically release bonds and pay for that and go to a certain amount of debt. So part of it is we are limited by what the mayor allots us for capital improvement, and we also have to think of the current fiscal environment that the general government does with that. And so it means it's a two-pronged approach where parents, rightfully so, advocate for us to do it, but we also have to remember we need to advocate the mayor's office and the council to advocate and release funds for those capital improvement budgets, because unlike, the uniqueness of being a school board, we do not have taxing authority, and we do not set, I don't want to get too technical. We can't dictate how often or quickly we like to move on capital improvement, because if we did, we would not have as many portables as we have. So it's one of the things that it's a fundamental of how Metro government is set up. But I mean, that's something, as we continue to communicate with the mayor's office and council, the importance of making sure when we do capital improvements, that's more than sidewalks and potholes and things like that, but that there has to be advocacy amongst ourselves, but also more linked to the parents, that this is one thing where the mayor does have direct, in the council, also the council, we not want to limit the council's ability to advocate for, it's one thing for us to drive the academics of it. It's up to them, and that's working in partnership with them to do the capital improvement for it. And part of it's just, unfortunately, a power delay. I mean, we went several years where we did not receive any capital funds. And so when you do with that, and then we had the pandemic, and then trying to do deferred maintenance and things like that is becoming complicated.
Yeah, and I think I was just trying to highlight how really when it comes to advocacy at the council level, to make sure that our Metro council members understand, if they're receiving communications like, well, I want fifth grade now, and I want, I don't want to wait. That really plays into the capital budget as well. We can have the highest level of desire possible to sort of complete all the phases of this plan, but just literally not have the space for it because the capital funding isn't there. And so I think that's a really important thing for them to understand. There's funding our budget. There's funding our aspirational budget, or what do you call our dream?
Aspirational.
All the words you can think.
Yeah, aspirational.
Yes. And then there's the capital budget, which fits in with literally like 99% of the things we want to do. Also require some of that capital funding. I think I was just trying to highlight that as talking points moving forward. I talked to a lot of my constituents who want to write to their council members and express to them what their desires are. And so I think it's important for them to understand that piece of it. And can I ask one? Sure. Maybe two more questions? Does Rachel Ann want to go?
Rachel Ann will be next.
Okay. Also want to be sure, back to the Reimagine thing, I'd like us from a budget perspective to put a lot of thought into how middle schools are being affected. The middle schools that will no longer have fifth grade, and therefore at least, sort of during this transition time, will have, in some cases, significantly less students than they have had, and how that may affect their ability to have certain resources in their schools. I just don't want our middle schools to be at all negatively affected by the process. And, yeah.
Happy to respond. Again, part of this building the plan for Metro Schools Reimagine there's been lots of thoughtful planning. I'll just say that, and the team's coming together still weekly to review this information. So, and again, there's so many moving pieces to this that we've had to make sure that everything was well aligned. So with regards to that, remember, we are an SBB district. So based upon the students that are being served and their unique needs, that's how our schools are funded. I also want to remind us that while this is perfect timing that we could not have anticipated with regards to our ESSER funds, we're also spiraling $24 million per year to our schools, which is funds that they typically would not have access to. So this is a perfect kind of storm happening with fifth grade transitioning out, but schools also receiving additional ESSER funds to meet the unique needs of their students. And so we have paid close attention to what those shifts have been, to make sure that schools are able to maintain and have the resources that they need as they move forward. But fundamentally, what's most important about transitioning fifth grade to elementary schools and the structure of our middle schools is the quality of the learning experiences for our students and the outcomes we know that it represents. And so if we do this well, and my educator colleagues who've been working closely with me on this can guarantee that we've got that GPA experience, what we're going to be doing is setting up a strong foundation for all of our elementary school students so that they can really thrive in middle school. And it helps our middle school teams then focus intently on those middle years as students prepare for their high school experience. So while there will be an initial shift in enrollment, the goal and the hope, because of the experiences and not because we're just driven by numbers of our students, that those experiences will generate. They will translate into what those enrollment transitions will be during this short time. So we have been very thoughtful about that planning, understanding the needs both in enrollment and SBB and the investments that are there. That's why you also see in our ESSER budget investments that are provided at the district level. There are some things that we know we want to have available in every school that doesn't come out of our school-based budgets. And those things we're funding from the support hub level, at least over the next few years, creating those proof points, having that evaluation to know that it has an impact on our students, and then shifting to our aspirational budget. So that's why you see that new category, which the board approved, of getting those federally funded initiatives eventually into our operating budget so that we can have that standard of operations and experiences, quality experiences across all of our middle schools.
I think the only other thing I want to just be sure we highlight, particularly as we're moving towards doing these public presentations around our budget plan, is that our need at the city level may very well be higher than ever before because of changes to the state funding formula. And so I just want to be, and I appreciate the transparency that you've offered around that, Dr. Battle. And I just want to be sure that we are just continuing to be really open and honest with folks about that and how that could very well affect us in a big way, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on the intention of Nashville or Nashville leadership to make education the highest priority, which, I mean, I, of course, believe it should be the highest priority in our city and in our state. It is not in our state, clearly, the highest priority. So I just want to be sure that we're making it clear about those additional challenges that we'll face around funding at the state level.
Yes, ma'am. We'll be leveraging the same presentation in those conversations, not shying away from the total picture, the complete picture of where we are, what our aspirational budget presents, and what it's going to take in order for us to get there. We will. Again, to your point about Metro Schools Reimagine, be unpacking some of those specific moves and shifts in there, one of them being around our digital future work as well. You'll start to hear more and more about that. Again, we want to be very intentional, very strategic about what those next moves look like. So you've not heard a lot about it yet, but I'm just kind of putting that on everyone's radar around our digital future and integrating that, not just at the high school level, but from our early grades all the way through high school, and how that digital future work can impact our communities.
Thank you. Yes, so I had a note about TISA, or TISA, so I appreciate that, Ms. Masters. I'm glad to know that some of that information is going to be included in the community meetings. Are we also going to be having any community meetings or specifically reaching out to our staff, both certificated and others, about the employee compensation aspirational budget needs? I'm mostly curious of what has been their feedback. I know what I am hearing, and I know what I assume would be the most popular out of these buckets that are provided to us on page 15. But how are we receiving that guidance from them directly?
So for the first part of a conversation, the reason we varied those dates and times was to make them as accessible as possible to everyone to attend. So that was the intent behind setting up those various days of the week and times to encourage participation. So I'm going to take us back to the teacher pay study. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. We are hopeful that the pay study itself addresses a lot of the needs that we have. So with our support pay staff, we've had representatives from several of our unions, other leadership roles, in the initial conversations around what they would like to see, where they think some challenges and opportunities are. As we move forward. What you see in the aspirational budget are kind of high-level strategies where we've received some feedback in the event that we aren't able to get the full investment, right? These are areas that we can begin to attack to move us in the right direction. I am very hopeful, and I'm also encouraged by the sense of urgency of the pay study, understanding that we have to do something now, and really just being able to drill down to what that total investment dollar will be. So it will all depend on that investment space. If we are able to get the support pay study completed, and we're able to have a large investment, some of the aspirational items will go away because we would have addressed most of those needs through the pay study. So we wanted to also have some aspirational backup items based upon those conversations and needs to begin to get at what we're hearing from our employees. In particular, if you're looking at slide 14 of the presentation, at the very bottom of it, you see the calls for step increases and for the COLA increases as well. There is a strategy that could address a lot of the needs of our employees through that approach. But right now, we've kind of poured everything into the pay study and are hoping to have some options by which we can advance through some of the needs we've heard from our support employees.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand. So if the support pay study comes back in enough time and it identifies and, changes our pay scales for our staff, then these other transportation incentives, recruitment, they're on page 15, paid Veterans Day, paid family leave, those additional strategies and costs will no longer be considered for this budget year. Would they still be considered for future budget years? Because I think there's still things that we need to try to provide if possible.
Some of these aspirational items you've seen
For many, many years.
Yes, so it doesn't mean we forget about them. It just means that we invest. We want the largest investment for our employees. So, for instance, last year with our teacher pay study, we took off some of the strategies because we were able to, in a lot of ways, advance beyond what we had in our aspirational budget. And I think no one would disagree with that at the rate at which we were able to increase our teacher pay. And so we'll just have to study it once we know that number and hopefully check off a lot of those boxes that we've been working towards. Otherwise, we'll come back to some of the items, like I said, on slide 14, on slide 15 as well, to make those informed decisions around pay. You might also see, let me just do a quick scan. No, I will stop there. Yes.
I was going to say, maybe you have a slide I don't see. I was
No,
watching yours.
no.
Watch what you're doing. Okay. Thank you.
So that's how we're approaching it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know that last year we had some sessions directly with the City Council's Education Committee to kind of go over this and why we're asking for these things and why it's so important, as well as I want to say we did the same thing for capital improvements. And so are we going to continue to do that this year?
We spoke at December, this is March, I think December, we spoke with Chair Berkeley, and we had discussion there. I've not heard from council yet about those discussions. I know that was talk beginning of the year, so I have to go back and circle back that was the intent to continue that tradition. But I know we did speak to Chair Allen and Vice Chair Sora, and we had a discussion where myself and Mr. Henson presented to the council basically where we are and how the process has worked and how we enjoyed the engagement. So I think they're still kind of in the process of finishing all that with the new chair, with Chair Lee.
Yeah, I would encourage us to continue that. I think it really explains some things to the council that they hadn't considered, and that they didn't understand why we kept requesting monies for specific things. And it's extremely important to have them understand why so that they'll be willing to fund it.
Yes.
So I think that's something we need to continue to work towards, and I'll do whatever I can to help as well.
Thank you.
Ms.
Tyler.
Claire Peters, if I can just add, they've sent out their draft timeline, and I know that they're expecting for us to have that time with them again, but the actual date hasn't been set. So they've given us kind of the time frame, several weeks, and so we're just waiting on the final date to confirm when that conversation will happen.
Follow up to that, I know last time, because of pandemic, we were Zoom, and we had it available for others who wanted to tune in. Is that something that we're going to make it available for the public to tune in as well? I mean, we kind of have to, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have to, because it's a public meeting, it's sunshine laws, but I would assume so. I mean, when we did it, when Mr. Henson and I presented, we did it in council chambers. So since the world is opening up again, I'm pretty sure it'll be the same format, either in chambers or in committee room with that, so.
If you're referring to the meetings that we held, or that I think I hosted,
Yes.
that were the virtual meetings, we are in communication with the education committee within council to see if we can do those. If those are, there seems to be somewhat of an appetite for it. So we're trying to encourage that, particularly before the budget season. If there's not a budget or an appetite for it, we will likely be asking for assistance internally from communications to provide like a one-pager or something that's more easily digestible for them. And so we can have a clear message among all of us on not only what our budget requests are, but also what is TISA, as there's so much floating information. And of course, understandably, that has not been voted on yet. But as that is finalized, I think we'll have to have those conversations as well, outside of what we would typically do for the budget committee. But as an advocacy piece, I guess.
I think if something goes with TISA, then we definitely,
Yeah,
it's even more so than normal.
And I think that's probably more the focus. I mean, I would say the advantage of they are it's part of a 4-year term, and I think we did such a good job last year, thanks to Chairman Elrod, that the institutional knowledge is there, and I think we quelled a lot of questions because of that. And since that institutional knowledge has not turned over yet, that I think we have less questions this year just because of all the conversations we had last year.
I would love for it to become habit.
Yes.
Yeah. That's just what happens.
That was our goal, actually, when we started meeting with the last 2 years, we have really worked hard, really as a board, because staff was already doing that, working around the state to make sure that the messaging around MNPS was more appropriate. And I think we've done a better job than we had in years past of just meeting with the different entities that so influence our decisions. And so I do think it's time to kind of turn that up a notch and maybe set that in stone a bit more with future mayors, future vice mayors, considering that they set who the budget and education chairs are. So it might be worth just having conversations as soon as those
I think
elected
so. I think the matter, you don't have to do it as intensely because the foundational knowledge is there. Now it's more of maintaining. And I think that's the difference of, instead of having like 5 meetings we had.
Yes.
We had like 5
We don't
meetings.
need those.
Yeah, we don't need 5 meetings, but 2.
But that was a good level set.
Yes.
It was a lot of work.
But I think we need to be very mindful of, as like in 23, when we have the new council, we continue that trend and tradition that it's a whole new reset, and we do a much thorough part, and in between councils and school board members, we may do 3 instead of 5.
This is year 3 of the aspirational budget process. Remember, year 1, we were responding to all the calls, and thank you to this board for allowing us to make that adjustment. But now that this is year 3 of the aspirational budget, I think everyone's kind of gotten a rhythm to it, and we're trying to be mindful about its format. I'm trying to be consistent in that and just plugging in the new information so that it can be easily followed by others, including the one-pagers. So we will be working on that as well.
But thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's good to have that out.
I think,
That's our intent as a board.
I think it's also good for the public in general to understand what that relationship is so that they know, you can please advocate with us for what you need, but then you're also going to have to advocate for us to actually get it if we put that in our budget, which we clearly have. So that's important. And then I had one more. I had, at our last budget meeting, I had asked about doing some sort of incentive or bonus for retention for teachers, and you had mentioned that Dr. Battle, that you were looking into doing something more than that. And I just wanted to kind of check in on that and see if you guys had moved farther into being able to explain what that could look like. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but.
No, I mean, of course, I don't think anyone has any numbers right now. We're definitely waiting on that. It is just fundamentally understanding the philosophy around bonuses are one time.
Yes.
Right, and we're trying to take an approach in valuing our employees by doing a few things. The first thing is including our step increases as a part of our continuity of operations. That is a huge step in the right direction for us as a district, but also advocating around our COLA increases as well. And we know what's happened over the last year or so, and we want to make sure that we're keeping up with that. And so without having the investment, I can't give you a dollar amount of what that looks like, but it's just changing our mindset that it's bigger than just a one-time bonus if we have the investments to do that. And so in my mind and in our leadership team's mind, it's about adding to that annual income that will pay dividends for retirement, things of that nature. It really counts, right? And it's recurring, and it's not just that one-time impact. And so that's what we're thinking about. We did do a bonus at the beginning of our ESSER funds, but now that we are where we are, particularly with our certificated teacher pay, we want to continue to elevate their base pay, not including things like the enormous earning power over the summer with promising scholars, planning days, so on and so forth. And so that's the mindset there. We'll have an update once we know the investment from the mayor, and then we'll continue to advocate with Metro Council. So hopefully we can achieve above and beyond what a one-time bonus can provide for our employees.
Right. Well, I worked in Metro as a teacher when there were no step increases, so I know exactly how that feels. So anything we can do to protect the people who actually make this work, our teachers. So.
Yeah, and let me say, and I get it because, we went through a few years, and I was not sitting in this
More
seat.
than a few.
So I know what it feels like where it didn't happen. And so we're also trying to recover and build the trust back that this board and administration are trying to approach things differently, advocating in different ways to make sure that for years to come, we can consistently guarantee those step increases and COLA increases as needed.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Bugs?
Thank you. So we, over the weekend, there was a great conversation on the radio station about staff, parapros and support staff pay increases. And I keep hearing the suggestion that we have enough money. We shouldn't be looking for more money. We shouldn't desire to have our children invested in with more than $12,000 a year. And I want to ask us to stop pushing that narrative, to instead advocate to those who can invest in our children more and urge them to do so. Instead of suggesting that our children are not worth more of an investment. I've been a taxpayer since I was 23 years old when I bought my home. I want as much of my dollars to go to public education, right? I wanted to educate your child, his child, their child, my child, our children. We as leaders cannot continue to push that narrative. I've also heard in years past where board members sit at this table and say, well, we should just be able to find the money that I want for this programming, for this raise, for this initiative, and I want to charge us to each be doing as deep a dive into the document as possible. And I can reach, better yet, I think this is more a question for maybe Dr. Sevier and maybe our legal staff. Mr. Whitaker. When it comes to doing a deep dive, similarly to how we did when we were looking over contracts, and it was suggested that we should be able to find this big pot of money by just eliminating contracts, and we took a work session to do so, as long as that's publicly noticed, we can still do that, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a retreat. It wouldn't even necessarily have to be facilitated by staff. It could be something that just board members who believe we can find $25 million for a raise, that we can just do that in one of our government buildings. Because if that is the case, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call for a work session where those who want to find money, instead of advocating for more, we can come together and try to find money and decide which teachers we would fire to give others a raise, or decide which programs we would pull from students to be able to buy other buses. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that we're not pushing this narrative that we should stop investing in children because $12,000 is not enough. So Dr. Sevier, Ms. Bobo, if you don't mind, I'll reach out to you tomorrow so we can do a quick poll of the board and see which of those that are speaking about not investing in schools, if they can come and sit at this table, sit at a work session. It'll be open to the public if they want to see and help watch us review those couple hundred pages worth of documents. So Mr. Henson, again, we're not going to ask you to facilitate this. This will be a board issue. But if I could just get a couple of printed versions of our current budget to, over the next week or so I can send those out to the board. People can start reviewing to cut. Thank you.
Mr. Hentz, if you need a union rep, I know some people. If you need a union rep, I know some people. Ms. Masters.
Okay, and again, I know I've got to, not to belabor it, or maybe to belabor it, 42% of principals say they want to leave their jobs within the next 3 years. I keep coming back to this, how stressful this time has been on principals. I feel like we talk a lot about teachers, and I'm so glad we're talking about support staff. But I want us to give, even though I understand that the pay study for certificated administrative level staff is next year, I just feel like we need to be really deeply thinking about retention strategies for principals as well. I don't want us to be facing a mass exodus as much of the nation is. And I want us, to think about the potential for some sort of bonus, something. I really would like us to consider that. And I realize this is, again, me just adding to the wish list. But I think it's really important. And when I think about what we've been through as a district for the past 2 years, the thought of our strongest principals starting to leave is very concerning to me.
And I just want to add to that, and as you know from my past history, I'm all for employees being paid equitably and fairly in living wage, but also want to be mindful that not all answers are financial, and that, and even part of the Great Resignation, it's also a mental health issue, and that we're also mindful that when we ask, are we also engaging what is part of the retention, not to shy away, and I don't want to run away from compensation. I do want to have a thoughtful conversation, but also think about, I know I personally have had the privilege to walk away from a very lucrative job because of the mental health state that I wanted to be. And throwing more money would not have solved that problem. And so we can't always assume that money is the solution, and that we also provide some type of emotional support around a really tough, in Audra's times, I'm trying to think of the right word, that everyone's been suffering through, and not to negate, but also that we're also providing a culture where we can provide some mental relief along with adequate compensation. That it's a both and not a one only. And I just want us to be thoughtful of, there are people that want to make sure when I say we should treat people with dignity and respect also doesn't cost money. And make sure that we continue to set that culture. And also that dignity and respect is also being compensated with dignity and respect. But just make sure that we're very thoughtful with this. Mr. Little, you have,
Thank you. I echo exactly what you just said. And I also just want to point out that when we're talking about step increases, when we're talking about COLAs, that includes our administrators as well. And so I just want to be clear about this, because every year we're trying to do something around employee compensation. When we're talking separately about the pay studies, those are just deeper dives into what opportunities exist and where we might now be out of line with industry and like roles across. So I just want to make sure that the narrative doesn't get out there that we're not trying to every year value our employees with compensation. When we're talking about the step increases, when we're talking about COLA, that includes all of our employees. In fact, the only folks who've not benefited from that have been the support hub leaders, because we've held on some of that over the last few years. And so I just want to be mindful of that, because we can create narratives that counter against what we're trying to accomplish. So this is why we got to be thoughtful about what that investment is going to be. This is why we've kind of broken it down in the way we have in percentage, because it has to represent all of our employees. So year after year, when we're thinking about continuity of operations, that includes all of our employees, and the pay studies help us do a deeper dive into what our next moves and our next investments may be.
thank you. Mr. Little? You're muted, or the volume's down.
Nope,
Hold up.
still can't hear you.
Testing. Nope. Hold on.
You can type it into the chat. That would be
Yeah?
Okay. You're going to have to type it into the, okay. The beauties of technology. And also, too, as we continue to have these conversations, also we need to think of the long-term effects of this. As we continue, we're also asking that we have to continue the maintenance of effort, and maintenance of effort when it comes to inflation, maintenance of effort as we add on additional items as part of the aspirational budget, and the advocacy is going to take, and community buy-in that's going to have to take, because at one point, we are going to be competing with other competing priorities of the city, such as affordable housing, or such as infrastructure, such as tax relief. So as we continue as we think, we also be very thoughtful of what we're asking of the council, of administration, about the cost to do this. And we continue to work together as a team to continue having those conversations of having a maintenance of effort of doing that, and also thinking long-term, particularly how we do not know the full ramifications of TISA and how that's going to have an effect down the road, that we are not creating a balloon payment for our city and for our education and then end up having a financial cliff, because we have set these expectations, and then through circumstances that are totally beyond our control, that we have a situation where we have to make some really tough decisions down the road. And so I also want to be very thoughtful of, even though we have a will of the board to do some great and audacious things, there are going to be consequences of that we're going to have to ask more of the community, more of government, more of taxpayers to continue this, to go on, and that we have a continual engagement with the community of how much the true cost of education. I think that's one of the things that we have to be very mindful of, is that our permanent cost of education, it's a service that you're providing. So a lot of things that we see, it's not tangible because it's a service. And like any other organization, the majority of our cost goes to personnel. If you really kind of take a breakdown of what we're paying, it goes to salary and benefits. And also, so I just wanted to say that just as a collective thought, as we continue to have these conversations of what's the cost in the immediate, but also down the road, and that we have to be very forethoughtful, not just think in the current fiscal year, but we have to think fiscal year 2, 3 years down the road when we have some of these discussions of, are we setting up unfair expectations, but also not expectations of us and the employees, but more importantly, expectations of people who live in our county.
And I just want to comment, I just real quick, one sentence comment that I agree with you that sometimes we are competing, but education is the base that will affect affordable housing, that will affect all of those things. So I want to keep in mind how important it is as a hub.
Yes.
So.
Yes. All right.
Go ahead, John.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. And sorry about this. Sorry for the echo. I think I hear us loud and clear. My only comment, which I think is super duper important, is we got to have empathy and not sympathy for the people who work for our school system. When I do visit schools and I meet with teachers, we do a read me week, or you sit in classrooms, the last thing I always do, I always go into the cafeteria and listen to them, or I go on the bus, or I talk with our paraprofessionals. And just my heart breaks because story after story that you hear is like they cannot afford to live in Nashville. And it's the end result of being the it city, being so popular, having so many people move, the prices going up. But I just think as we think about this budget, and I know money does not grow on trees, but I think it's just super duper important that we find the resources to help the people who help run our schools from day to day. With our bus drivers, when they don't get the kids to school on time, they don't get breakfast. When they don't get breakfast, and then they got to come in and catch up, and then they don't get the classroom instruction. So my only comment, because I hate this echo, is like, I do want to work together wherever we can find it. I know the council has an appetite for it. I know there are parents who are not bus drivers and paraprofessionals who have an appetite for it. And if we can find it, Ms. Buggs, Chairwoman Buggs, thank you for introducing the work session. I really look forward to it, and I look forward to working with all type of partners to see how we make this work.
Oh, I can't wait to report the findings.
Ms. Buggs will be the last comment.
That was it. I just can't wait to report the findings. I appreciate that we are finally not charging someone else for doing the work, because that's what our board was elected to do. So I can't wait to see you, Mr. Little.
Thank you. And so I just want to end on going back to kind of Ms. Tyler's discussion with our relationship with the mayor and the council. Just really want to thank Mayor Cooper for his relationship during his tenure as mayor, of really having a thoughtful conversation, I know with myself and with Dr. Battle and with her team, of really being a true partner with this and continuing that relationship of making schools a priority. He made a very audacious and probably the largest investment, there's no probably in that, in a very long time, of making sure our teachers were the best paid teachers in the state. And that was not an easy feat, particularly during a pandemic. That investment was made, and that investment is going to continue to be made. And so I just want to acknowledge that relationship and really thank him for that as we go into the season, that it wasn't forgotten, and that we're very thoughtful, and that we continued those discussions and making those hard decisions of not only finding resources, but also creating new resources. I mean, we, as a board, has historically have found a lot of resources, and we have shaved and shaved and shaved. And part of it is we have to find new resources even outside of our own budget, and advocating for that with the executive office and with the council office also, as we continue to run a very lean and efficient machine, as we've had a lot of conversations with the education of how much money actually, compared to our peers, go into the classroom. And that goes back to the service of the classroom. And sometimes when we say go into the classroom, that goes back to being a service. And so also to echo Mr. Little's comments, that's why employee conversation has been a priority of Dr. Battle and our board and myself. I've been working for support staff employees for decades and have had some very tough conversations. I was leading the fight against custodians when it was being outsourced. So I know personally to have that conversation when I was only 30 years old and telling someone 25 years my senior that they did not have a job come July 1st. I personally know that conversation. And that is a very difficult and tough conversation to have. So it's one of those things that I also want to be thoughtful of, that we're setting people up for success and we're setting expectations up for success, because I do not want to have that conversation ever again in my career or in my lifetime, but also that we are being thoughtful and strategic and being diligent, but also advocating with vigor of what our employees need. So Chair Buggs, I adjourn this meeting and we'll go into the board meeting.
Thank you. We will now begin the second the second meeting of the month of March 2022 for the
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.